The last time I stood on the stage, I spoke of the struggle I endured within myself through my battle with an eating disorder. Today, I stand before you ready to share something that I haven't shared with many before now. A few months into the semester last spring, I was faced with making a difficult decision. My personal struggles weren't letting up, and it seemed nearly impossible to make it to class every day, physically and mentally. I realized that although I had come miles from where I used to be, I wasn't quite where I wanted to be. I made the decision to readmit myself to the same rehabilitation program I entered 2 times previous. About a week into the program, my nurses and mental health workers sat with me, giving me the worst news of my life. My best friend and #1 support had passed away. I don't know how to compare anything to receiving news like this. I really don't. This news came at a time that I was extremely vulnerable, and that only exacerbated the feelings I was having. I immediately felt lost, alone, and broken. All things I have experienced before, but not this way. The only person I wanted to talk to about the pain I was in was my best friend himself. That night, with every precaution taken, the nurses took all of my stuff and put me in a room with a bed, a pillow, and a blanket. That's it. I had to sleep with the light on, be monitored every second I was awake or even sleeping. They called it suicide observation. I was confused because I didn't want to die. I didn't want to hurt myself. Every day, the doctor asked me if I wanted to kill myself. The first few days, the answer was no. While I was still inpatient, I was safe 24/7. However, when I transitioned to a day program, I was only safe under the watch of doctors and nurses 12 hours a day. Those no's soon turned into yeses, and those yeses turned into serious intent with a genuine desire to not make it to tomorrow. A little over a month after that, I was discharged from the program. This, although exciting on one hand, would be the scariest life I ever lived. I continued to see outpatient providers, but something wasn't right. I knew what was wrong, but I feared admitting it as I didn't want to be sent right back to the hospital. I wanted to end my life, and I was intent on it. When I first started to struggle with these thoughts, I felt completely alone. What I didn't know at the time was that I was one of 9.3 million adults in the United States that was having serious thoughts of completing suicide. With around a world population of 7 billion people, that seems very small. The percentage comes out to about 4%. Whether the number be 4% or 40%, I believe that number will always be too high. The thoughts I was having were constant. I was afraid of myself. I couldn't get away from the pain I was feeling, no matter how much medicine I was prescribed or how many hours of sleep I got. I was stuck in a mind that didn't want to be alive. I remember days where I would fight with my parents about wanting to die, threatening to, as bad as this is going to sound, essentially take my own life in front of them. It wasn't just the grief, it was the depression, the crippling anxiety, the constant fight in my head with a voice that wanted me gone. The voice that told me I wasn't good enough, not smart enough, not pretty enough. The struggle with an eating disorder that told me to starve myself until I couldn't anymore. Nobody knew how to help me. I didn't know how to help me. I had had it. I told myself this: if things don't get any better, with better being an extremely loose term at that point, by July 30th, I'm done. I had registered for the fall semester with no intent on being here to complete it. I talked about a career in psychology knowing I would never get there. I thought more about the dress my family would outfit me in when I was gone than my wedding dress. I began to tell people that it wouldn't matter if I drove off the road or if I didn't wake up. That's just how low I was. I wish I had a light bulb moment that told me life was worth living, but I didn't. I did, however, find a job at the end of June. Something my best friend told me before he died was that the work made his life worth something. When he was doing for others, that was when he was truly happy. I didn't think I'd find that in a retail job, and truthfully, I didn't. But what I found was a new circle in a company that stands for everything I do. A group of people who accepted the past that I had and loved me for it. A job that I was actually good at, and I believed I was good at it. I want to say it was around July 27th that I had a thought about the date that was in my near future. And truthfully, I didn't think much about it. I realized that in the weeks since I started my job, I was distracted. I wasn't necessarily dealing with the grief, or the depression or the anxiety. I was just living. I was working, I was continuing to be social, I was creating art. I didn't fit society's picture of a girl who wanted to kill herself. But that's the thing, Almost nobody who wants to kill themselves is the stereotypical suicidal individual that society tells us about. It's our mothers, our fathers, our brothers, and our friends. It's our teachers, actors, musicians. And the worst thing about it all is that we don't learn of the struggle before it's too late. We as a society are not aware of the signs and symptoms that are left by victims of suicide. We grieve in shock when our beloved musician takes his life, but we cease to see the signs that are so clearly there. I don't have a story that delves into July 30th coming and realizing what day it was and acting upon it. I don't. Honestly, I didn't realize the day had passed until one of the first days of August. Up until then, I feared being one of the 123 suicides per day in the United States. Once that day came and went, I learned something. I learned what I wish I could tell the people who are struggling now, and that is, it doesn't have to end that way. There are other ways out of your pain that aren't ending at all, and honestly, that is different for every single person. The way I cope may not be the way you cope, and that's okay. There's help out there. There's life out there. I think it's silly in a way to say that my job saved my life, because at the end of the day, I saved my own life. I'm the reason I'm still here, even on the days I don't want to be. However, my job provided the feeling of purpose that I so desperately needed at the time. It acted as a bridge of distraction to get me from one side to another. And I'll be honest, suicidal thoughts don't just go away. In the deepest pits of grief, they do exist. At the wit's end with depression, they're there. When my anxiety is so bad that I can't function at all, I ask myself if it's even worth it anymore. But it is. Life outside of these things, these sad and awful things, does exist. Just sadly, and it pains me beyond belief to say this, we don't all make it. I did make it, though. Some days I ask myself how, but I just remember that I did. I'm back in school. I'm here. I'm still working the job I love with the people that I love. I have the most amazing friends. I'm in outpatient therapy. I feel like a person again, instead of just a sad, empty shell. I want you to know that if you're struggling with depression or the loss of a loved one or school or relationships or anything really, that something more exists outside of it. I learned through my loss what helps me heal. That is, helping people and creating art. I know now what I want to do with my life, where I want my career to take me. I've learned to cherish the moments that I do share with the ones that I love. There's a lot about death that I still don't really understand and try to cope with on a daily basis. I'm learning how to live without someone that I thought would be in my life a lot longer. Learning who I am as a result of who he was in my life, rather than grieving who I am without him. I do struggle, but I also believe with everything in me that these bad things that have happened to me have made me who I am. I want you to know that if you are struggling, there are resources out there. Something I learned in the deepest part of my struggle was how important it is to be honest about how you're feeling and ask for help. I learned this in getting help for my eating disorder and again when struggling this past year. There are both local and national resources that I'll show now. For those struggling, check into these resources. There are 24-hour crisis lines and text lines in treatment centers that were developed for people just like you and me. There's no shame with asking for help, with admitting a struggle. It is a sign of strength to reach out and ask for what you truly need. For those that are allies, meaning that you have a loved one that is struggling, I truly encourage you to visit these websites if it will make you at the very least a little more informed about the signs of someone struggling with suicide or any mental health condition. After my struggle last year, I received the QPR, Question, Persuade, and Refer certification in suicide prevention. I learned just how susceptible I was to a struggle like this one and ways to help others in the same place I was. I also encourage you to get involved in the mental health community. I believe we are an extremely underrepresented group, even today, due to our struggles being invisible to the naked eye. Sign up for an Out of the Darkness walk, donate to the cause, or start a conversation. I finally encourage you to be an advocate. Be an advocate for the ones we have lost and help us prevent losing individuals in the future. For me, my story has a relatively happy ending. I found things that I truly love about life, and I encourage you to do the same. Find a spot where you can see the sunset and watch one. Take a walk in the woods, listen to the sounds around you. Discover a favorite song and sing it at the top of your lungs. Do things that make you happy even when you're struggling. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you're struggling, tell someone. No matter what it is, no matter how many times you've convinced yourself that no one cares, someone, I guarantee you, someone cares about you and wants to help you. No matter how alone the depression makes you feel or how panicked the anxiety makes you, there are people there to listen to you, even if it is a car therapy session at 2 in the morning. I'm learning every day that self-care is not selfish. It's truly necessary to survive. Now, I'll be the first one to say, I've heard stories like this one before, saying that it gets better as time goes on. And I'll be honest with you, I thought all these stories were complete bullshit when I first heard them. I didn't think it was possible to hit rock bottom and return. At least, I didn't want to return. What I have learned is that life has a funny way of just working out, even when it seems like there's nothing left to live for. I was there. I was completely set on leaving this world. However, something said, one more job interview, one more day, one more chance. And that's what you have to force yourself to hold on to. You have to force yourself to reach out, to be raw, completely honest. You have to remember that you were put here for a reason, and your reason wasn't to succumb to the pain that this life throws at you. This is something else I'm continuing to learn. Most importantly, remember that you can and you will grow. I always remember the parable of the mustard seed. Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed, the smallest of all the seeds. But when it is grown, it is greater than the herbs and becomes a tree, so that the birds will come and lodge in its branches. I used to talk to my friend about who I would become one day, and he told me, you can't be the woman you're going to be by staying the girl that you are. And as much as I hate to say it, I think I had to lose part of myself to continue on the path of becoming the woman I am destined to be. For me, living has been one of the hardest things I've ever done. But at the end of the day, it is also the bravest. Thank you.